Today I want to have a closer, more in-depth look at Viktor and discuss how, in my opinion, his story might actually be based on one of German's most famous legends, a story of Dr. Faust. League of Legends champion Viktor might just be the one that visually differs most from its arcane character, yet like anything else created by the writers, it has its justification and serves as a proper origin story as to why Viktor eventually might still become, herald of the new age of technology, contrary to what his body had in store for him, and how his ultimate desperation might lead him from the light towards the darkness, from the good towards the evil. I'd like to have a more in-depth look at his character and discuss his long way down. Viktor's tragedy is and still remains the sheer fact that his body failed him, that he is mortal, which he acknowledges more than any other arcane character, some of which are even willing to die for certain causes. Not him though. His own condition reminds him each day that he is destined to die, probably sooner than others, and he fails to agree to these terms. It's not that he is afraid of death, it's the fact that he wants his mind to continue living, in whatever shape or form. He just wants to be able to invent. Viktor, contrary to his current Piltovian habitation, comes from the Undercity, which he pointed out to Jace.
You didn't say they were from the Undercity?
What difference does that make?
What They're dangerous.
I'm from the Undercity.
He was born and raised there until the age of 19 when he moved to Piltover to make a name for himself. He knew no one, he had no funding, no patrons, no support whatsoever. All he had was his willingness to invent, to change the world, to make things better, especially for the people of Zone, but also both for the upper and the lower city.
Nobody's ever believed in me. Poor cripple from the Undercity. I was an outsider the moment I stepped foot in Piltover. I didn't have the benefits of a patron or a name. I simply believed in myself.
He made a decision to devote his life to the advancement of humankind, to make himself and his own needs less important for the sake of others. He became an idealist. He believes that only by embracing an evolution of technology can humanity's full potential be realized. He's also a breathing example of Piltover's guilt. What any Undercity habitant could become if given a chance to grow, to educate oneself, to be surrounded by proper conditions that do not lead to losing health because of how poor and toxic the air around the city is. As Caitlin pointed out,
this city needs healing, more than I ever realized.
Piltover's failed the Undercity, and Viktor is an example of how a person from Zone could potentially excel contrary to what Piltovians might think of them. Anyone from the Undercity can grow and contribute. In fact, anyone can grow, and what Arcane is actually trying to show us is that any divisions are a fake concept created purely because people tend to look for differences that cause disunities, look for conflicts rather than for similarities and ways to make peace. Viktor is a bright mind, which was quickly acknowledged by Hammerdinger, who took him under his wings. He had ambitions, dreams that slowly faded away as he started to realize his inventions were never enough, neither for others nor for him. Even his poor health, possibly a lungs disease caused by the Undercity toxicity, and his leg disability, did not stop him, as long as he was able to create. However, over time, he lost his ambitions, lost his way, a fact symbolically presented to us through the physical state he was in, worsening condition of his lungs disease. Viktor is literally suffocating, and his inability to properly walk tells us that he is unable to progress any further. It actually also made Viktor a very relatable character. So many people tend to imagine a life of success filled with opportunities and more or less are later on often faced with reality of mediocrity. Ambitions fade away, opportunities disappear, and one realizes the person they hope to be does not even exist. Instead, there's someone they no longer recognize.
Do you think it was my life's ambition to be an assistant?
Viktor ended up in an awkward place of in-between when he met Jace, which to him meant finally being given a chance, an opportunity within Jace's hextech idea, a possibility to actually make a change, to improve people's lives, to create something important, an invention bigger than any other thus far, bigger than himself, bigger than Jace or the council members. that was also a moment that gave him something to live for, and ultimately something that he can lose. That is when his health tragically failed him, yet again stopping him from taking one step further towards his goals. Ever since he was a child, Viktor suffered from a condition that led to his walking disability. That very condition visually paralleled his life circumstances. His willingness to invent, to shine, his struggle to achieve what he's been dreaming of that's been withheld. Even though his life circumstances provided him with a decent life, for sure a better one that anyone from the Undercity might have had a chance to get, Viktor still remained a person from Zone, which is something that even Jace did not fully remember. That sheer fact remained his driving force, something that motivated him to reach out further. None of the show's other characters, perhaps except for Caitlin, managed to bridge the wide gap between Zone and Piltover and strive to better the world for both societies. But it wasn't enough. As Heimerdinger accurately noticed,
it's a sad truth that those who shine brightest often burn fastest.
And he pointed it out around the time that Viktor realized his sickness is actually mortal. His dream and hopes might be lost. He might not ever get a chance to improve neither his situation nor the lives of Zonites. Sky Young's death, which he blamed himself for, pushed him towards the edge. Eventually, Viktor became suicidal. It was in that moment of vulnerability when he actually reached towards his past and realized that there is actually a chance to heal himself, except that by taking that chance, he'd be literally selling his soul, abusing a substance that he promised to only apply for good. He went back to Zingit. Meeting Zingit as a child, Viktor initially aided him in saving a creature called Rio from dying. Later on, he found out that Rio was intentionally subjected to large doses of shimmer. Outraged by the scientist's cruel actions, Viktor parted ways with him for several years, promising to not go back. Except he became desperate. He reached out to Zingit, asking for guidance for his ever-worsening condition. The scientist did offer him a vial of shimmer. Viktor became willing to experiment on himself. And it was that very moment that altered not only the nature of his body, but also forever changed the course of his life. Now, does that story sound familiar at all? Viktor's story more or less resembles the one of Dr. Faust, written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the protagonist of a classic German legend. There's too many resemblances to overlook it, and what adds to it is the fact that one of Arcane's lead writers, Christian Linke, is actually German himself. Now let me briefly tell you the story of Dr. Faust. Faust is bored and depressed with his life as a scholar, just like Viktor. After an attempt to take his own life, again pretty familiar, huh? He calls on the devil for further knowledge and magic powers with which to indulge all the pleasure and knowledge of the world. In response, the devil's representative, Mephistopheles, appears. He makes a bargain with Faust. Mephistopheles will serve Faust with his magic powers for a set number of years, but at the end of the term, the devil will claim Faust's soul, and Faust will eternally be enslaved. That story very much parallels Viktor's transformation from a sick, lost and weak scientist
Figment. My contributions will be short-lived.
to one of the strongest champions. Viktor gave up his ideals, knowing very well, maybe better than others, what shimmer does to people, just to save himself, possibly assuming that his noble goals, willingness to live on, to help others, justify it. Except by doing so, he doomed himself.
We lost ourselves, lost our dream. In the pursuit of great, we failed to do good.
Viktor wants to live on, to invent, especially now that he has something to live for, to guard, even if in Jace's shadows. But his tragedy is the fact that he is mortal, and in order to live on, he has to compromise not only his body but also his ideals, possibly slowly losing himself to madness, very much like Zingit did. Dr. Faust's story has many different endings and many different versions. It's actually quite a long play, almost 9 hours long. In one of the versions, Faust actually tries to improve and create a society that is pretty much enlightened. Again, that sounds very much familiar. But in the original early tales, Faust is irrevocably corrupted and he believes that his sins cannot be forgiven.
Jace will understand. Perhaps.
And when the term ends, the devil carries him off to hell. Up to this day, the meaning of the phrase Faustian idea is that in order to develop fully, we have to flirt with very dangerous ideas.
If you take this path, they will despise you. Love and legacy are the sacrifices we make for progress.
But at the same time, hold on to a sense of higher purpose. And at this point of the story in Arcane, it is actually hard to tell if Viktor will actually remain faithful to his ideas. And if we are to judge based on League of Legends, he might actually go down. And I believe the turning point for him was turning to Zingit, being fully aware that Zingit is a person who is very far from morality. Thank you so much for watching. Do check out my other Arcane video essays. Stay safe, guys. This was all from Stop Me O channel. Bye.